How's it going, everybody? Welcome to episode 245 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Cody Abrams and Melbourne back with you after a couple of weeks off. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers on back-to-back Stanley Cup wins, and they are partying, boys, in the state of Florida. Just the videos and everything. Brad Marchand, guy looks like, he's in Weekend at Bernie's, and just crazy stuff going on there. So it's been a couple of weeks since we chatted with you. Also want to mention as well, there was a list that came out of the best 90 Canadian ice hockey podcasts. The link is posted in our most recent Boys in the Booth Instagram post that you can check out the full list there. And out of 90, we landed at number 65. So, hey, man, we'll take it. Like, cool to crack a list like that. And so, again, just appreciate the ongoing support. And this may very well be our last episode before our summer break. So again, just thanks for a great season. And we are going to be talking about the 2025 NHL entry draft, which is coming up here over the Canada Day weekend, rounds 1 and 2 on Friday and Saturday, the 27th and the 28th. And we're going to do what we did last year and just kind of do a little snake draft, go through our top 10, and then we'll each reveal our personal top 10 picks at the very end. So always look forward to this time of year. And we get the Stanley Cup finals over with, fellas, and then we're right into draft and off season, free agency and all of that. So exciting times to come for sure. So why don't we get into it here? And Chad, are you able to get the order out for us?
Yeah, so I'm going to do a random number generator, Harp. Before we do, just wanted to say, you mentioned the Stanley Cup celebration and everything. And I got to say, I've been so tuned out over the last week or so. That team just drives me up the wall. I can't stand to look at them. They're the pettiest winners. They're doing everything they can from what I've seen in the clips to really rub it in McDavid and the Oilers' faces. So they're sore winners, if that exists. It really rubs me the wrong way. Hate that team and hope that they have no more success in the future. And I hope none of their free agents re-sign there. And I hope they all sign in Toronto. But yeah, so just needed to get that out there. Okay, random number generator.
Taste the salt from here.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Random number generator for this snake draft. Here, Case, you'll be number 1. Harp, you'll be number 2. I'll be number 3. Going to generate first pick. Here we go. Goes to Harper. Second pick will be me.
Great.
Third pick will be Casey.
The hardest pick in this draft. Wonderful.
Yeah. Case gets 3 and 4. Goes back to me for 5. Harp gets 6 and 7. I get 8. Case gets 9 and 10. So that's how we'll do it. Okay, so Harp, you remember that order?
Sounds
already?
Good. Might need another reminder here, but I know that I have the first pick, so that's exciting.
Okay, let's kick it off.
Yeah, let's get into it here. So obviously, just before we get into it here with the snake draft and going into our top 10 like we did last year, after 2 pretty good drafts in 23 and 24, this draft after pick 20, like we've talked about before, we're kind of hearing the talent and all of that really kind of drops off a little bit. Whereas like the 2023 draft was kind of seen as, first round and a half sort of thing. But that's kind of the narrative out there that the talent kind of drops off after pick 20. Regardless, still a lot of great young players in this draft that will certainly help out a lot of different franchises. So starting at number 1 here with the New York Islanders, Matthew Darche is now at the helm as a general manager. His first crack at being a GM. They desperately needed to move on from Lou Lamoriello, and out of nowhere jumped into a number 1 overall pick position. But you know what? This team needs that. And I wrestled with this back and forth. You guys obviously saw the video that I uploaded on our Instagram about the connections that are there with James Hagens and how it would be like a dream come true for the kid to be drafted by the New York Islanders. He grew up so close to Long Island, played for the Long Island Royals in youth hockey and all of that. However, they do have the number one pick. There is a clear-cut number one overall player here in this draft, and that is defenseman Matthew Schaefer of the Erie Otters out of the Ontario Hockey League, and I have him going number one to the Islanders. We've seen the reports out there that the Islanders are kind of testing the trade market right now on Noah Dobson, but I think there's a pretty good chance that they end up keeping him. I think it's more contractual kind of stuff. They have to figure that out right now. But look, there's a right shot defenseman who was getting Norris votes just a couple of years ago. And so to think about the possibility of having Schaefer and Dobson left and right as your 1-2 punch on the blue line for the next decade plus potentially is a really intriguing and exciting proposition for the Islanders. And they've got some really good forward prospects up front too. I mean, the fact that they got Cal Ritchie in that Brock Nelson trade with Colorado, Cole Eiserman is coming as well, Danny Nelson too. So I think they're in a good spot there. Take the best player available, and that's clearly Matthew Schaefer. We had Craig Button on this podcast that, a couple years ago around the time of the World Juniors, and I've heard him kind of compare Schaefer to Drew Doughty a little bit, like just a true number one defenseman who can really drive play. And so I think it'd be a great pick for the Islanders, regardless of the connections to James Hagens and all of that. But hey, who knows? I mean, I could see the Islanders maybe pulling off a deal to get another pick in the top 10 here. But I've got Schaefer going to number one to the Islanders here to kick things off.
I think that makes a lot of sense. That was, in my mind, the consensus number one. Seems like that's what everyone's saying now. And this draft has kind of reminded me of the 2017 draft, where a lot of good forwards out there, not a solidified number one overall, bouncing around. At least it was that way for a while. Now it seems like the Islanders would be crazy to not take the Makar of this draft. And, maybe the Devils missed out on picking Makar in 2017 because they were caught up in which forward is better. But there's a clear, very good defenseman here. So it makes a lot of sense. And hey, maybe they end up trading Dobson for the fourth pick because the Mammoth don't seem to want to be picking at number 4. And James Hagens could slip back there. So the Islanders fans can keep that dream alive for a little bit longer, at least 6 more days.
Yeah, it does seem like the Mammoth really want to move off from that pick. They want to get good right away, I guess, in their newly renovated barn with their new jerseys. Why not? Trade the pick, get better, and compete for a playoff spot, because I think they were, pretty close last season in their inaugural year in Utah. So I could see that. Schaefer's the pick here. Makes total sense. There have been a number of other players who earlier in the season were talked about as potentially going number one. In case you and I actually made a bet about this heading into the World Juniors like ages ago, and we both picked wrong. We both picked
almost
2 guys
certain
we thought
to not be who we picked.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you had Martone going 1 and I had Hagens, right? And it was $20 on the line. Whoever goes first overall, the other guy pays up. But I don't think either of those guys are going number 1 anymore. It's going to be
this was
Schaefer.
in November when we were doing this.
Yeah.
So a lot has changed.
This was ages ago. But it just goes to show how much can change in one season, because at the time those two were neck and neck, going first and second overall. And then even dating back a few years ago, it was Michael Misa's spot to lose. And it seems like maybe he did lose that number 1 overall, because now Schaefer is the solidified or consolidated rather number 1 overall pick according to elite prospects. But I mean, we'll see. Crazier things have happened, right? But I agree, Harp. I think they go with Matthew Schaefer, the Islanders do, and maybe try to get another pick in the top 10, because they're trying to get younger. They're trying to change directions here with Darsh now at the helm. So yeah, I could definitely see them trying to do that.
Good hire, by the way, I think too, for a GM. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
All
okay.
right.
Number 2, I'm going to go with the player who I just mentioned was the undisputed number 1 probably 2 years ago, leading up into this draft. He dropped until to almost like the 10th spot. If you look at some rankings about a year ago, he's made his way back up after an incredible season this year with 134 points for Saginaw in the OHL. And that's Michael Misa. I think the Sharks are going to take this fun, exciting player at number 2. I think most scouts agree that he is the consolidated number 2 pick. He's the pick that makes sense for this team. Bob McKenzie, as we all know, is one of the best at doing this, projecting where players are going to go in the draft. He has him at number 2. And the thing is, it does seem like maybe San Jose could go a different direction. I was reading an article by Scott Wheeler in The Athletic, and he said coming out of the combine, people were hearing that the Sharks may have some sneaky interest in Frundell to get in that number 2 spot. Frundell, as we know, also a really good player, but it seems like it might be a bit of a debate, but I think Misa is probably the pick. Really high IQ, really high skill, exceptional status, obviously, in the OHL years ago as a 15-year-old. I think Misa's the pick here at number 2 for the Sharks. What do you guys think?
BetterHelp is the paid partner of this video. The new year is a blank space for you to write a new story. BetterHelp makes it more convenient to get you started. BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy more comfortable and convenient. They carefully make sure therapists on the platform are well qualified, and their customer support team is there to help you if you have any questions. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Your next chapter starts today. Get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp online therapy at betterhelp.com/boysinthebooth in paid partnership with BetterHelp.
We interrupt this podcast to tell you about one of our favorite partners, Sign Up Expert. If you're a sports bettor, whether brand new, casual, or hardcore, listen very carefully because this ad is for you. Guys, line shopping for the best odds matters, and that's why any profitable sports bettor needs to be using multiple sports books to maximize their profits. Thankfully, there has never been a better time to get signed up, and we are here to connect you with the best promotions industry-wide. When you use our link at signupexpert.com/boysinthebooth, you can get access to all of the top sports books in your region, along with a review of each platform and its unique benefits. Most importantly, all of these sports books have valuable sign-up offers for new users. And when you register through our link, you will automatically receive the top offer at each one, allowing you to start line shopping with an enhanced bankroll. Guys, it's simple. When you use multiple sports books, you ensure that you can always access the best available odds, which is key to successful and profitable sports betting. So, if you want to take advantage of these incredible benefits and support our brand at the same time, please consider signing up for your next sports book through our link in the description below, signupexpert.com/boysinthebooth. If you're planning on signing up for a new sportsbook anyways, you might as well use our link and support the boys. So, one more time, that's signupexpert.com/boysinthebooth. This podcast is sponsored by SeatGeek, the absolute best ticket app out there. SeatGeek takes the confusion out of buying tickets, making it quick and easy to get the best deals to tickets at your favorite sporting event. SeatGeek does this awesome thing where they score each ticket out of 10 based on its value, so you know whether you're getting a good or a bad deal. Last time I got tickets to see the Devils play, I first saw red tickets. I waited it out, monitored the price in-app, and once I saw green, I pulled the trigger. SeatGeek makes it that easy. And here's the best part. SeatGeek has completely hooked us up. Boys in the Booth listeners get $20 off their first purchase on SeatGeek with the promo code BOYSINTHEBOOth in all caps. Click the link in our description to download the app, and remember to get your discounted tickets using the code BOYSINTHEBOOth in all caps. Get great seats for a fraction of the cost with SeatGeek. That's who I've penciled in. I think it's a no-brainer. He is such an offensive weapon, just elite goal scoring and playmaking ability. I would like to know why he was not even like considered for Team Canada World Juniors. I hope he'll be there next year, unless he's playing for San Jose, which, I mean, yeah, exactly. So, I think that they'd be crazy to not take Misa. His offensive production in the OHL is just ridiculous.
Yeah, like 62 goals, 72 assists, 134 points, just crazy. And from what I've read,
Patrick Kane in his draft season.
Yeah, ever heard of him? Pretty good. But from what I've read in doing research for this episode, it does seem that the gap between 2 and 3 is a lot larger than the gap between 1 and 2, if that makes sense. So between Misa and the next guy, it seems like Misa is not a lock, but he is expected to go number 2. And as we know, the draft doesn't always go as expected, but as of right now, he is expected to go number 2. We'll see what happens on draft day. Really good player.
Yeah, and it really seems like, to your point, I agree. It seems like this draft starts at 3. You know, like things could always change, but I have Misa going to San Jose as well. Next best player available. You know, just an offensive weapon, and he would fit right in with, you know, a group that already consists of Celebrini and Smith and Eklund and Casper Haltonen too, with the London Knights and that sort of thing. However, I think the Sharks would love to have that number 1 pick and draft Matthew Schaefer, because they really do need more blue liners. You know, they have Sam Dickinson and Shakir Mukhamadullin, and that's great, but they could really use another stud there as part of their blue line future. So I'll throw that in there as well. And also I will say, like, the next team that we're going to talk about, and who Case will specifically talk about, I think the Chicago Blackhawks would love Michael Misa too. So you know, there's been rumors out there of maybe, you know, those two teams trying to trade up a spot or two or whatever. Hey, who knows? But just know that they like those players indeed.
It would totally make sense for the Sharks to get a defenseman. I just really don't see it, because as Case and I were talking about before we started recording today, it's pretty thin in terms of defense, like at the top of this draft.
It is,
so,
yeah.
After Schaefer, it's you know, after
Schaefer, and I mean, we may very well talk about a couple of defensemen here, but I'm just gonna, you know, throw this out there. Probably won't be till like 8, 9, or 10.
Yeah,
that's fair to say. So
for sure. So I think if the Sharks want a defenseman, they either have to trade up to number 1, which seems like, you know, the juice might not be worth the squeeze to do that. Or you trade down and potentially miss out on some game-breaking talent up front. So as much as you want to pick for need, I think at number 2, you really just have to pick the best player available, and I think that's Misa.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Case, number 3, Chicago.
Yeah, that's why I said that I had the hardest pick in the draft, is because this is when the draft starts. Good job showing up and putting your name on the piece of paper, boys. So I'll go ahead and pick number 3 here for the Blackhawks specifically. And I'm actually going to take Anton Friendel, the guy you mentioned for the San Jose Sharks. I hope he slips to the Blackhawks. A lot of scouts have talked about his game and how it translates so well to the NHL, and how he has that style of play that's going to work almost immediately when he joins the league. And I think that's going to get honed even more when he's playing in the SHL next year. He has an NHL shot currently, and that's something huge for him, but it's his two-way game that everyone has talked about so much. A great center, and I think that makes sense for Chicago, because they're deciding if Bedard is going to be a center in the future, and it seems more and more likely that Bedard is going to be a winger. And if that's the case, then Anton Friendel is a no-brainer here. If they like Bedard at center and Nazar at center, then I think it becomes Porter Martone at this pick. But I think they're going to elect to pick the center here, and Anton Friendel is the next best center.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that pick case. That's what I had as well. Probably going to go in the 3 to 7 range, according to most lists. Like clearly, it has been a player that's jumped up a lot of lists this season. One of the only players in this projected to go in the first round that's playing pro hockey against men right now. Victor Eklund is another guy who's also playing pro against men. So I think that is a point for Frundell as well. And from what I've read, and actually this is a funny quote, he was described as a tank on skates after the combine. That's what some of the scouts were calling him because of just how explosive and powerful he looked at the combine, and then watching to see how that translated into his on-ice game as well. So again, from what I've read, just very versatile player, plays a no-nonsense type of style, really hard on the forecheck. Like I mentioned, plays against men, so he has that going for him, and could be a very attractive piece to build around, especially if you're the Blackhawks when you have Bedard as kind of a smaller, skilled player. Well, this is a guy, even though he's not, incredibly huge in stature, plays bigger than he really is. So I think Frondell will be the perfect pick here at number 3, Case. I think you nailed it. I think that would be exactly what Chicago would want, especially too if, like you mentioned, Bedard ends up kicking out to the wing. You either build the 2 down the middle, have, sort of a skilled, kind of talented guy like Bedard as your 1C, and then Frondell as your 2C, who can kind of, do it all, maybe play more of a 200-foot game, be a little more tenacious, and be a bit of a hound dog, and play a more 200-foot game. And then, or you could put them on the same line, and that could be fun as well. So I think it's perfect pick for Chicago.
Yeah, the Hawks have some really good options here because, as we've said, we're kind of expecting the draft to start at 3. So the Hawks are in a really fun position here, but there's only one position that they need to target at this pick, and it's the center position. And in my opinion, yes, could Bedard be a future winger instead of a center in the NHL? Sure. I'm kind of thinking almost that Bedard stays in the middle and Frank Nazar is on the right side riding shotgun with him. I mean, you never know. I think that is a possibility as well. Again, the Blackhawks have a lot of options to find and pick their future number 2 center behind Connor Bedard. That's what this pick is all about, I think is fair to say. Frondell is a great option, already good size and certainly with room to grow. And he's already 6'1", 205 already. I mean, that's really good size actually for an 18-year-old getting drafted and coming into his draft year and all of that. So no doubt he had a good combine. Again, there are other options. Frondell, certainly a good one, just a great 2-way game. And, immediately when you see this name pop up, you immediately associate him with like Barkov or Lundell or whatever as kind of a baby version of those two. Who knows if he'll develop into that, but no question, a very good 2-way center with good size, already physically mature at just 18 years of age. So whether it's him, Hagens, Denoyer, whoever, there are a lot of really good options up the middle for the Blackhawks at this pick. So they've got a big decision to make here for their future.
Toughest pick in the draft, like Kay said.
Yeah, yep. Absolutely.
It's done. And moving on to the next one. Like I mentioned before, I think the Mammoth are likely to end up trading this pick, but they have talked about if they do keep it. They mentioned that, a lot of pundits have them tied to or associated with specific players. And they said, we don't have that. That's not a thing. We're going to take the best player available to us, no matter what position. And I think for that reason, it actually ends up being Porter Martone at this pick. They said that they liked him at the draft combine. He boasted about the Mammoth a lot in interviews after the combine. Martone himself, he said he loved the team and the group of guys that they have there. And it seemed like that's where he wanted to go. And that might say something. I don't know. size, playmaking ability, leadership, scoring touch. He's kind of got the full package as a winger. And if they're not worried about, picking a center, then I think that this is the pick for them.
Yeah, I think that's the key. There are a lot of teams who are really chasing, getting that center, getting that future piece to build around up the middle. But if the Mammoth aren't, and they're just looking at the best player available or the player with the most potential game-breaking ability, then yeah, I could very well see Martone. The draft totally opens up for me here. Like, I could be convinced on any player in this spot at number 4. Like we said, they might trade the pick, but they might keep it. And if they do, a winger could make sense versus, a team like the Predators, who are right after them, who I think we can all agree also need a center, which, they would be chasing centers. So I wouldn't really see them taking a Porter Martone because he does play the wing. Or, even the Flyers, I think they could really use a center as well. So a lot of teams chasing centers, but if the Mammoth aren't, then I could see it happening. Just a true power forward, like I said, game-breaking ability. The skill is off the charts, uses his size pretty well. Like we talked about, has kind of been all over the draft rankings, but I think it's safe to say that he'll probably go somewhere between maybe that 4 spot case like we're talking about and maybe 8. I could see him slipping a little bit, maybe if teams are picking based off of positional need. But yeah, I don't mind it. I think the fit is there.
I've seen him as high as 1, like I mentioned back in November, we were talking about that. And even last year, he was slotted in at 1 for a while. And I've also seen him now as low as 9. I think Pro Hockey Rumors had him at 9 to the Buffalo Sabres. It's like, that's crazy. That's such a crazy swing. But I've seen it's really like shuffle the deck for these next 6, 7 players.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, with Martone, I don't think it's because he had a bad season or anything. I think scouts are just noticing other players, and other players have taken steps. It's not that Martone has taken a step back, but there are players who kind of came out of nowhere. Like, Bradley Martin is a guy or Brady Martin rather, who I wasn't really thinking about 6 months ago as a legit potential top 5 pick, and now all of a sudden his name is in the ring. And and Frondell as well as a guy who's climbed. So I could see it at number 4.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned Brady Martin there. I think Utah likes him a lot as well, but I think Martone to Utah makes a ton of sense. Kind of looking at him as the next best, player available. Again, he's got size and a lot of skill. Had a great year with the Steelheads in the Ontario Hockey League, Utah, we know that a couple things. We know that Bill Armstrong likes size, and they're bringing in a couple of key prospects that I think are going to be very good for them, and they have a lot of size. Dmitry Simashev on the back end and Daniil Boot up front as well. And Utah has been saying this since their season ended. Even at the trade deadline, they want to get bigger up front. As much as they love size, they're kind of small up front guys. Like Matthias Michelli had a tough year in and out of the lineup. He's a smaller guy. I think we could see him on his way out. Unbelievable talent up front there with guys like Keller and Schmaltz and Gunther and Cooley. Yep. But they're not big guys. I think they want more of that muscle up front. So while I think they would love a player like Brady Martin, I think you got to go with Martone here because he's kind of the next guy available if Utah, in fact, decides to keep this pick. And they could certainly afford to move this pick if they wanted to. I mean, they just have a plethora of picks and prospects still for years to come, and they're ready to start contending for a playoff spot now and try to be a perennial playoff team. And we know that that ownership group with Ryan Smith, they're aggressive and they want to take some big swings this offseason. So we'll see what happens. But if they end up picking if they end up keeping this selection and making the pick, I think Martone makes a lot of sense. And I mentioned this around the time of the World Juniors, I think to you guys, if you remember, but everything that I've read on Martone, very comparable to a guy like Corey Perry when he was younger. Similar body type and similar game. And so if Utah can get a player like that, that's fantastic. And it's interesting too. Last thing I'll just say, it was interesting to hear Elliot Friedman talk about Utah at the draft last year. They had offers for that number 6 pick, I believe, and they said no. Like, we have our guy. That ended up being T. Ginla. So it's interesting this time around that, the number 4 pick may be in play, but if they keep it, I think Martone makes a lot of sense for what they're looking to add up front and what they need to add to their forward group.
Right. Okay, so now on to me for number 5. Case, this is where we differed a little bit. I didn't have Martone going that high, though, like I said, I could be convinced on a lot of these. And I honestly see the fit. It makes total sense to me, him going at 4 to the Utah Mammoth. But at number 5, going to the Predators, we mentioned that they're looking at centers, we would expect. So a few good centers still left on the board. Caleb Denoyer, Harp, can you correct me if that's wrong?
Yeah, Denoyer, yeah.
Denoyer,
yeah.
Not the best with French, even though we were taught it for years in school. That's Canada for you. But then also James Hagen still available, Brady Martin, who we mentioned, still available, Roger McQueen. All these players are centers. I think the Preds are going to go with Denoyer, the 6'2", 172-pound center out of the Q. Some pretty high upside, but also decent certainty as well. I think most scouts would agree that this is a pretty safe player. Not going to be the, 150-point superstar Connor McDavid, but is going to be a pretty safe bet to be a quality NHLer. And I think you know what you're getting in this player. A couple of the Sportsnet guys actually are really high on Denoyer. So Bukala from Sportsnet has him at number 2, and Cosentino at Sportsnet has him at number 3. So I don't know if he's paying Sportsnet or if TSN just doesn't like him, but there's something going on there. But so I have seen him as high as 2 and 3, and I think it's just because it just seems like such a safe pick. It's a player who can produce, but is also really talented in terms of his vision on the ice. He finished 5th in QMJHL scoring. He was the MVP of the QMJHL playoffs, so his stock really rose as the year went on, and especially in the playoffs. I think he had 30 points in less than 20 games, so he was really great in the playoffs. He can also play against the other team's best forwards. Like I said, really high IQ, great passer, very deceptive. This is all from what I've read on the scouting report. Very high compete and willingness to get to the dirty areas. So like I said, it seems like a pretty complete player, can play that 200-foot game. I think that's exactly what the Predators need. They need a guy down the middle who can be reliable for years to come because, I don't think Ryan O'Reilly is going to be there, when they're eventually good again, if ever. My buddy Kobe won't like hearing me say that. He's a big Preds fan, but yeah, I could see them taking Denoyer here at number 5. What do you guys think?
This is exactly who I had going number 5, and he's my first of 3 major risers. This guy rose like crazy, like you mentioned, after the QMJHL playoffs and the Memorial Cup playoffs and the Combine. He continued to just go up and up and up. A lot of it, like what you said, 200-foot game, amazing playmaking ability. But look at the accolades from this season. You mentioned QMJHL playoff MVP, the Guy Lafleur trophy. Good name to have associated with you. But
is that good?
He also won the Mike Bossy trophy, which is the best professional prospect in the QMJHL. And he won the Personality of the Year in the QMJHL. So there's just so much going on with this guy. It's like really dynamic prospect that, is really checking all the boxes. So he's risen like crazy. And you're right. I've seen him at number 3.
But does he like country music? That's the question.
Well, there are a handful of teams in the top 10 here who desperately need centers, in my opinion. Nashville may be number 1 out of that mix. The fact that Ryan O'Reilly is their number one center right now. This is not a knock on Ryan O'Reilly, but he's on the wrong side of 30, and he's on a very good contending team, is a 3C. Like we saw with him on the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Nashville desperately needs to add some centers. I personally didn't have them picking Desnoyers with this pick, although they certainly couldn't go wrong with picking him. And, again, the biggest thing that stands out, Case mentioned it there a second ago, was he has been one of the biggest draft risers this season. And so clearly, with the accolades that he's received this year, not only are you getting a high IQ player, you're also getting a high character individual too, which is also important, and teams value greatly. So, hey, this would be a great pick to Nashville. Not who I had them taking at this pick. I had Desnoyers going to another team in the top 10. Just solely based on need and a connection, because you guys know I love those this time of year. But this would be a great pick for Nashville regardless.
You going to give us the connection now or when you talk about the team?
Well, let's see here. Yeah, you know what? I mean, I'm next up here, so that ties in perfectly to the next team that we're going to talk about, the Philadelphia Flyers at number 6, who I have taking Caleb Desnoyers, because guess what? Just like Nashville and the Boston Bruins, who are in this top 10 group as well in the draft, Philly, they need centers as well. We know that they were interested in a guy like Dylan Cousins during the season and whatnot, but they need centers. And so I have them picking Desnoyers. I think he'd be a great fit. Size, skill, IQ, great character kid, all of that. And his brother, Elliot, was drafted by the Flyers organization as well. So naturally, I like to go with a team and a player where there's some sort of connection. So wanted to get that in there as well. Anyway, I have the Flyers picking Desnoyers at 6.
Well, who do you actually have them picking? Yeah. Because he's off the board.
He's off the board, so you got to pivot. You got to.
True. Yeah. That is very true.
That is what
you know
doing.
What? No,
that is precisely the exercise.
No, I know, but anyway.
But I'm glad we got the connection.
Yes,
to hear that, but
yes, I know,
but I know. After it.
Well, if there's a player who fits the Flyers mold better than this guy, I would love to find out who he is. So next is Brady Martin of the Sioux Greyhounds. And there was a scout or some sort of NHL executive who said at some point this season that if this kid was in the NHL right now, he'd be one of the best hitters. Like, just a very physical winger, again, a big draft riser. Kind of reminds me of the way Beckett Seneca rose like crazy last year and ended up being picked 3rd overall by the Anaheim Ducks. And by the way, I think Martin would be a great fit on Anaheim as well. But this guy, I think, would just fit the MO of the Philadelphia Flyers, just wanting to play with an identity. And I think Rick Tocchet would absolutely love this guy. So yes, I know I got off track a little bit there talking about Desnoyers, and well, Hart, wake up here and welcome, because he's off the board. So, we pivot to Brady Martin here. I think he'd be a great pick for the Flyers.
I totally agree with that pick, by the way.
This is the first time we as a collective group have gone off of my draft board here. So just wanted to point that out. But
interesting.
This does make a lot of sense. The pick is right for the Philadelphia Flyers. I do like Brady Martin. He is one of my 3 risers that I mentioned. I said there's 3. Well, he's the second one. I felt like he was such a Bruins pick. But ultimately, it didn't go that way, and I can see why he's also a Flyers pick.
Yeah, I thought he was the perfect Flyers pick, Harp. And, from reading comparables to this player, do you know what a lot of scouts, what player they're comparing him to in the NHL?
Tom Wilson.
Sam Bennett.
Oh boy, there we go.
I've heard that
But
too.
but could probably do a pull-up at the combine, this guy.
Oh,
yeah,
geez.
but so compared to Sam Bennett, because of his motor, his forecheck, his nastiness, like that kind of game that he plays, can play the 200-foot game. And like Case, like you said, his stock has been rising. He is the consolidated 13 on Elite Prospects, but I was reading the Athletics breakdown, and their writers there, Corey Pronman, doesn't seem to think that that the Flyers will let him slip. Like Corey Pronman seems to think that the Flyers are the team that he stops at because they like him. More
so, the Athletic in their draft took him at 5.
Well, that's right. So it's I don't know. Like, he seems to be rising like crazy. Some scouts are really, really high on him. The consolidated rankings haven't caught up, but I could really see him being a Philadelphia Flyer for all the reasons that we've said. So, Harp, number 7 now.
Number 7, okay, and that is the Boston Bruins.
And Denier again.
God. Talk about another team that desperately needs a center, right? Like,
draft for it, honestly.
Absolutely.
Like, all the teams need a center.
For sure.
Bunch of centers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually did not know until recently that Brady Martin comes into this draft as a center. So, there we go. But no, I mean, Boston, they need a center. Absolutely. Really great to see them with a pick this high. I thought that, Don Sweeney, for a general manager who's received a lot of criticism, in particular for that 2015 draft that continues to haunt the Bruins to this day, I thought he did a really nice job at the trade deadline in kind of, realizing that, like, this isn't our year. We need to reset a little bit, like we saw with the Washington Capitals a couple of years ago, and look where they are now. And we know that Boston wants to get right back into the mix and be a playoff team next season. However, a guy who, is I don't want to say like a controversial pick, but he's kind of a wild card. That's a better word for it. This guy, big centerman, like just great size, 6'5". You guys already know who I'm talking about, but he's had a really tough time with injuries. But, this is one of those players and one of those selections that a team could make where it's high risk, high reward. The talent is there. He's raw. He's big, kind of compared to like a Quentin Byfield. May take a little longer to kind of come along, but I think would be a great pick for any team. And so I have Roger McQueen going to the Boston Bruins at number 7. Again, just, kind of fits the MO of the Bruins: size, skill, and talent. And he's had some bad luck with injuries, but this could be, a big swing, but one that really pays off for Boston. And they desperately need to hit on this pick. And so I have them taking Roger McQueen here. Again, just a big center who I think would fit the MO of the Boston Bruins, and, a building block that they could have for a long time.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I was shaking my head right from the start, Harp, because that's exactly who I had going to the Bruins as well. I think it sort of restarts their identity. Like, it's sort of like a refresher of what their identity used to be, when they were just this tough, long team, just this team that would grind you down. And of course, the embodiment of that was a guy like Zdeno Chara at 6'9". But to have that size and talent up the middle by getting a guy like McQueen, I think would just sort of reset that culture, would be starting anew in in a very perfect way. I could see it happening. And by the way, you mentioned this is the first time that the Bruins have picked in the top 10 since 2011. So that's quite a long time. And so when I say refresh, I really mean it. Like, this is a team who desperately needs to kind of rejig things. And looks like we lost Casey for a sec. I'm sure he'll come back, but we'll keep her going. But yeah. So to me, like, this was the perfect pick. Like you said, bit of a high risk one because of the injury. He had a back injury and missed a bunch of time this year, only played 17 games, did have 20 points. But even despite that injury, some scouts are still worried about the fact that, you know, he seems to light up bad teams and not be able to produce at the same clip against good teams. So that was one criticism that I found multiple times in doing research about this player. So that was something, so that was something that, I wanted to bring up. Looks like we got Case back. All is good. Yeah. But yeah, so even despite that injury, there is some risk with this player, but I do think that he fits the Bruins mold and would be a perfect guy for them to take because, again, this is another team that needs to add a center, and why not get the biggest, baddest, Bruinist guy available with their pick here in the top 10? Case, what do you think about McQueen going to Boston?
I didn't have him going this high, but it had nothing to do with talent. I think that the nature of his injury has a lot of teams a bit weary of picking him in, with a very valuable top 10 pick. So I had him slipping a little bit further than this, but I could fully see the fit, especially if Martin's gone. Then this is kind of like the next guy to fit the Boston Bruins mold.
Yeah. I also do feel like, depending on how the draft shakes out before this pick, I think the Bruins might just take the best player available. Like, maybe it's Porter Martone at this pick if he slips, or maybe it's James Hagens. I could see them just trying to pick the player with the most upside available because they are sort of desperate for talent. It's a team that, outside of Pasternak and of course their defenseman, where is the talent really? Like, they're built like a team, but they're not necessarily the most talented team in terms of high-end skill. So they might just pick the best player available.
Well, and if they need a center, if they add one of these centers that we've mentioned here, and there are a lot of them, that would all of a sudden, like, you would have, McQueen, Denoyer, Hagens, Martin, whoever it is, plus Dean Letourneau, who's a 6'7" center who they picked last year, and sorry, Chad, but Fraser Minton as well, who's going to get a really nice opportunity there too. And if they want to have Matthew Poitras play in the middle, they have that as an option as well. So they pick a center here, any one of those guys, all of a sudden Boston's future down the middle doesn't look too bad.
Yeah, true. They've got a lot of darts, and you just have to see if you can hit the bullseye with one.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what are we now? Number 8 to me.
Number 8,
right?
Seattle.
Okay. Seattle at number 8. See, my board is a bit janky now that we've kind of built this snake draft together. But I think Seattle probably takes the best player available, even though it's a center, in my opinion. It's James Hagens. It's a guy who's still on the board. Like we talked about, was projected to go number 1 as recently as, about a year ago. So yeah, I think Seattle might just say, hey, if he falls to us at number 8, sure, we'll take him. So James Hagens, bit of a down year, I would say. Maybe it's not correct to say that it was a down year, but a point per game. And some scouts were a bit disappointed at him being a point per game at Boston College, because while it's impressive, I think scouts expected a bit more from Hagens in terms of production. So it's a high bar to set when you're a player who is expected to be number 1. And yeah, unfortunately, some scouts were a bit disappointed with his production, despite it being pretty good, all things considered. The upside is definitely there. But yeah, I could see Seattle making this pick. Could also see them pick the best player available if Hagens is picked before the number 8 spot. So that's what I'll go with at number 8.
Okay. Yeah, you guys have absolutely butchered my my draft board, but
it was going so well.
I mean, if somehow James Hagens is still available at this point, no matter what team is picking at number 8, they should be picking James Hagens. I'd be shocked to see him slip this far. So yeah, I think the Kraken, despite a lot of people saying that they need to pick a defenseman that doesn't really exist in this draft, they'd be crazy to not take James Hagens at this point.
Yeah, if a player like that falls on your lap, you don't worry about position. You just you take the best player available. And with Hagens too, like it seems like every year there's a player or two in the top 10 or top 15 that drops, and a team is able to snag them at a really, really good spot. So maybe it's Hagens this year. Could be Martone. Could be, whoever, a guy that we haven't mentioned. Maybe Frundell slips. Maybe one of the other risers slips. So it seems like every year there's one or two players who end up getting picked at a really good spot, and the team feels very lucky for having done so.
Yeah, personally, I don't think Hagens falls that far in the top 10, but hey, you never know. And if he's there, absolutely snatch him up. Ton of talent. And personally, I did have Seattle taking a defender at this point. I do think they need help at that position. But hey, if Hagens is there, that'd be an absolute home run, I think, for Seattle, a team that is kind of in no man's land, it seems like. They took a couple of big swings in free agency last offseason with Stevenson and Montour, great players. But, I think you go back a couple of years ago to when Seattle made it to the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. They knocked out the Colorado Avalanche, and hindsight's 2020, and that might have been the worst thing for them, because I think that they've kind of tried to accelerate things a little bit here before they've been ready to. And they're a team that could certainly use a higher pick in this draft. Maybe we see them move up, but if Hagens is sitting there on their laps, then they wouldn't have to, and they could run up to the podium and they'd be happy. Actually, no, they can't, because it is a decentralized draft this year, which we all hate. And but hey, I don't think it'll be that way for too long. So anyway,
it sounds like all the media guys are like, "Hey, this is our party weekend. What are you doing? We need this back."
Also, Bettman has been. Just the way that he's like handled this whole thing and talked about it is pretty funny. It's like, hey, you guys, the managers, you wanted this.
Yes.
You wanted this.
He's been very like what's the word? Like he's been
very Gary about this.
That's right. That's a good word for it. He really
anyway.
has.
Okay, we got 2 picks left here. Who are we at now with 9?
It's a case for both, right?
The lucky guy who gets to pick both of these.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
For the Buffalo Sabres at 9, I just had them picking the best available forward. And for me, that's Jake O'Brien remaining at this point in the draft. Center from the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL. I actually had him going slightly higher than here, so I think that Buffalo's happy with this.
Interesting.
This is my third and final riser of the draft. He's been going up and up and up all year long, and is now finding himself in everyone's top 10. He is talented with the puck, and it's his IQ and vision that everyone points out as being his real asset. But he gets a lot of compliments to his complete game in his 200 feet. So I guess Dylan Cousins out the door, Jake O'Brien in to replace him as a very similar player in that aspect.
I could see that. From everything I've read about Jake O'Brien, just has incredible vision. The passing is great. High-end playmaker with just, again, like that exceptional vision and IQ, is able to find a teammate, even if no one else saw that pass was available. And, notably, he played on the line this year with Nick Lardis, the Chicago third rounder from a couple of years ago. And he led the OHL in scoring with 71 goals this season. Nick Lardis did, not Jake O'Brien. But Jake O'Brien had 66 assists this year. So that was, he surely contributed to a good chunk of those goals for Lardis. So just a guy who's able to find you wherever you are, is able to sort of slow the game down, make players around him better. From everything I read about this player, it reminded me a lot of Mitch Marner. Like just a guy who is able to, evade contact and put the puck on someone's stick even when no one's expecting it. So if that's the type of player he is, then yeah, I think Buffalo would be extremely happy getting him at number 9. And while we're on Buffalo, I did want to mention this, Harp. I want to see if you know the answer to a couple of these questions. We've been doing this podcast since 2018. Okay, so we've done 7 drafts since we started. This will be the 8th. We usually do a mock top 10. We've done mock top 15s in the past. So here's the question. Here's the first one. There's 2.
Okay.
How many years of the 8 have we talked about the Sabres picking in the top 10? So how many years of the 8 years that we've done the podcast have the Sabres picked in the top 10?
7 of those 8 years, I would say.
6. You were close.
Damn. Okay.
But wow, that's insane. They also picked in the top 10, by the way, in 2017, 2016, 2015, 2014, and 2013. I was just looking through this and I couldn't believe it. They've had like a million top 10 picks.
Couple of number 1 picks in there as well, and number 2, and a couple of number 2s actually. Just
number 2 who's celebrating his cup win right now. So yeah. And the second question, and this is just to rub a little salt in the wound. I'm not actually trying to do that. I was just looking through it and it blew my mind. How many years have they picked in the top 15 since we started the podcast?
Every year. Yeah.
every single year since 2012. They've picked in the top 15.
Yeah, I mean,
14 straight drafts, including this one.
14-year playoff drought, so that makes a lot of sense. And you know what? It's funny, like, at 13, they may have had one of their best picks, Zach Benson, who came into the NHL right away and hasn't left. That loaded 2023 draft that I think we'll look back on a number of years down the road, and that'll be a special one, very much like 2015. How we look at that draft now. And also, again, just like talking about O'Brien, this pick makes a lot of sense. Like another little connection, former Sabre Jay McKee is his coach with Brantford. So that's a little connection too. O'Brien, great player, size, center, all of that, like there are a lot of teams who I think believe that you win down the middle. If Buffalo ever figures out how to win and make the playoffs and that. The only thing that I kind of have take issue with this pick is that I think there would be some redundancy there with the Sabres. Like they have a lot of centers. We saw them move Matthew Savoy because they kind of have a surplus of centers already. However, O'Brien may be the best player available at this spot. Again, not who I had Buffalo taking, but it does make a lot of sense. So we'll see. But if you want my honest answer, trade the pick. Do not make this pick. Trade it for a player who can help you now. Jesus, like here we go again.
Well, might as well. Like drafting 14 times in a row in the top 15. Like, come on.
Hart, key thing I said is the best available forward. I think centers can just easily be switched over to a wing at one point. It's never a bad thing to have too many good centers in your system.
No, for sure.
I just imagine that the next best available forward, and that was him for me. So that's where I went. But I would agree with you that Buffalo just needs to get rid of this pick.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Case, you again, sir, for number 10 to wrap it up here. It's the Anaheim Ducks who took a nice step last season.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but at number 10, we're going to be picking the second defenseman in this draft, which can't say we've done that too many times since 2017. A lot of people had a defenseman going to the Kraken, and it was a lot due to him being 6'6" and right-handed. But I don't think that he is the next best defenseman. So I'm going to pick a defenseman who's 6'1" and plays like he's 6'6" in Kayshawn Aitchison, who I think we've all seen the highlights and the reels on Instagram of this guy blowing kids up with their head down in the middle of the ice and then fighting. He just absolutely loves to crawl and to, fly across the center. He reminds me of the clips of Zach Shankar back in the day.
Yes.
Oh boy.
So, I mean, that's an absolute asset for him. But on top of that, he's got a very complete two-way game. A lot of guys complementing his just positional awareness in the defensive zone that makes people go to the outside. And on top of that, his scoring. 26 goals in the OHL last year as a defenseman is nothing to scoff at whatsoever. So getting a guy who lays the body like he does, plays positionally sound, and dish the puck and dish it into the net. No-brainer for the Ducks, who we've mentioned before are a defenseman factory. Everyone they pick at defense ends up being a valuable player at one point, and then they either trade them or play them, more often trade them. So if I'm the Anaheim Ducks, I just always draft defensemen.
Yeah, fair enough. It's worked out for the last decade in terms of having talent kind of go through your system. But so I could see that case. So funny. Like, I pulled up his hockey DB or his elite prospects rather, as you were talking about this player, and the little blurb, it just cracked me up. It says, loves nothing more than seeing attackers approach with their head down. He hunts big open ice hits, connecting those every chance he gets. Saying that he makes his presence felt would be underselling it. Like, throwback defenseman, he's also a spot defender and blah, 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 blah. But just loves catching players with their head down coming across the neutral zone. So, yeah. Old school defender, but also, like you said, talented offensively too.
I saw the clips of him, and I'm like, oh, another guy that would have been nice to have on the World Junior Championship team, but whatever.
Yeah. They're going to have to do that differently this year. I don't know what the hell that was.
Maybe they just picked the best players.
That was a disaster. Absolute disaster. And never bring back Dave Cameron ever again. God.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do our top 10s here.
Yeah. Let's go through each of our top 10s, and then we'll close it out. And I think I think maybe we don't have to decide that right now. But yeah, I'm talking about potentially taking a break. But anyway, let's do our top 10s, and then we'll close out the episode.
We will post something on our Instagram if we are going to do one more before we take our summer break. How about that? We can figure that out for sure.
Yeah, I like that.
All right. So, Case, you want to start here? Keep the train rolling with you and just give us your top 10.
Yeah, I think we actually picked all the players in my top 10. No one went off the board that way. So our snake draft, we'll post that as well as how the draft plays out. But this is how I had it playing out myself. And that's Schaefer, number 1 to the Islanders, no brainer. Misa, number 2 to the Sharks, no brainer. And then who I picked, Frundell for Chicago, Martone for the Mammoth. Then I had Desnoyers for the Preds, so continuing on with our draft so far. But then I went Hagens to the Flyers. I think that they're going to be happy about how Michkov slipped to them in that draft, and now they can have Hagens slip to him, slipped to them in this one, and that be a 1-2 punch for them. That's going to make a lot of people happy in Philly. Then I had Martin going number 7 to the Bruins. Like I mentioned, he just fit that mold so well. Then I had O'Brien actually to the Kraken, and then McQueen to the Sabres, and Aitchison to the Ducks. So that one stuck.
Okay. Nice. So I think I just had one different player from you. I didn't have Aitchison in my top 10. I only had one defenseman in my top 10, and obviously that was Matthew Schaefer. But here's how my top 10 shook out. To the Islanders, number 1, Schaefer. To the Sharks, number 2, Misa. To the Blackhawks, number 3, Frondel. To the Mammoth, number 4, Denoyer. To the Preds, number 5, Hagens. To the Flyers at number 6, Brady Martin. To the Bruins at number 7, Roger McQueen. So Harp, I was right with you on that one. I really thought McQueen was the perfect fit there. And actually with Martin to the Flyers too. And to the Kraken at number 8, Porter Martone. I think they would be so happy if Martone slipped all the way to 8. I didn't know where to put some of those players. Like, it's going to be one of those years where a really good player is going to slip. To the Sabres at number 9, I had Victor Eklund, actually. I think a talented winger that, might be some redundancy there, Harp, like you mentioned.
Yes.
But I think that's sort of their MO, a talented, undersized winger who,
don't want it. Like, well,
that's what I thought.
Please, God, no.
That's what I thought could make a ton of sense. And honestly, it's a shame that San Jose doesn't have a later pick so that they could have both.
Like,
they could, I mean, yeah, they could trade.
They could
for number 9.
I thought about that too.
And take Victor Eklund to play with William Eklund as well.
Yeah.
And then at number 10 to the Ducks, Jake O'Brien. So that's my top 10.
Gosh, I got to tell you, boys, like my top 10 looks a lot different than yours.
Well, let's hear it.
I got to tell you. So at number 1, Schaefer to the Islanders, no brainer. The draft starts with him. Misa, number 2 to San Jose. I actually had James Hagens at 3 to the Chicago Blackhawks. USA hockey guy. Feel like Chicago has done really well with that. Guys like Nazer, Oliver Moore, Sam Rinzel. I think that theme could continue. And again, great centerman in Hagens. Number 4, Martone to the Utah Mammoth. Great fit there. I had Frondel at 5 to the Nashville Predators. A Swede who could have Philip Forsberg on his wing for years to come. I think that would be a kind of a cool proposition there. Number 6, I had Denoyer to Philly, McQueen to 7, or to Boston at 7. Excuse me. I did have Radim Murtka at number 8 to Seattle. I do think Seattle needs more defensemen, and he's a guy right in their backyard playing for the Thunderbirds in the WHL. Number 9, I actually had Aitchison to the Sabres because they could use defensemen who are actually tough and stick up for teammates and, would be a good cultural add to the organization. So I think that would be a nice piece for the Sabres there. And then I actually had Brady Martin going to the Ducks at 10. I think he's a guy who I could see, I know he's listed as a center, but could see him kind of as another Beckett Seneca, like I mentioned earlier, a big physical winger, big draft riser this year. I think he'd be a great fit for the Ducks, who, by the way, I think are going to make the playoffs next season, in my opinion. So anyway.
A lot of people are saying that.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my top 10, boys. Looked a lot different than yours. And I will just say too, it is cool to, and rarely does it happen where our top 10s look anything like the actual draft itself. But hey, it's cool if you can kind of, see a couple of your picks pay off. I think I had Boot going to Arizona, now Utah, and so you can hang your hat on a couple of picks that maybe you get right. But yeah, that's
sure.
The way it looks for me. So
for sure. And honestly,
I could see Hagen. Sorry, I could see Hagen's going number 3. Hart. The only thing that I say for Chicago, and the reason why I kind of didn't even consider that, is at some point they got to pick a center at center in the draft. So, I just, they're 3. If they pick Hagens, they're 3 top guys, young players, all not really exactly what I want at center in the NHL.
Right.
So That's where I was getting at.
So you're saying too, like you could see it with Hagens, but you think that there's a little uncertainty there with him at center?
Yeah, I like Bedard and Nazar have both been like they're wingers. And I think that maybe James Hagens, in the same way as, he's been compared to Cooley so much, the same way that Cooley might not be a center in 3 years is just where I'm getting at with that.
And to build off that case, and so Harp, I started there. I actually had Hagens going 3 to Chicago because of the whole Patty Kane comparison, how deeply entrenched they seem to be with the National Development Program. And it seems like, they like taking American kids. But I couldn't make it make sense because, case like you're alluding to, Bedard as their number 1C might not be a center. And plus, if they went small with Bedard because he's 5'9", maybe like 190 pounds or something, he's thick, but he is shorter in stature. I don't think you can take a guy under 6 feet to be his 1-2 punch. Like I think the game is different. Like we went for a long time when analytics was sort of up and coming, and even like dating back to the start of our podcast, like we kind of laughed at the dinosaurs who would take, big guys in the draft, and we laughed at Arizona and still do because they reach to take big guys, which is dumb. But you can't reach. You gotta find guys who are big and can also play. But yeah, I just don't see Chicago making it work with 2 undersized stars down the middle. I think you need to go big with one of them. You need a bigger player. So I just couldn't make it make sense for Hagens, even though he is the consolidated number 3 right now, according to Elite Prospects. And that takes all of the, it consolidates all of the scouts rankings out there, Sportsnet, TSN, whatever. And he's number 3.
I see a lot of Jack Hughes in that player as well. The way that he moves and the skill that he has and the IQ and playmaking abilities. Case, I don't know if you agree, but that seems to be a name that gets associated with James Hagens as well. Yeah,
I agree.
And sorry, one more thing I will say, Chad. Like you mentioned, like analytics and all of that, whatever. Well, you look at the Cup winner the last 2 years. The team that leads the league in dump-ins, the Florida Panthers. Just saying. Case, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I agree with the comparisons to Jack Hughes, but I think that plays into exactly what Chad and I are saying right now, is because I am having premonitions and worries about the future winning a cup with the 3 best players on the Devils being Bratt, Heischer, and Hughes, all very much so undersized.
True.
Nico less so, but for the most part, they're undersized guys.
Yeah.
And that stresses me out. So
if
I'm Chicago, that would stress me out.
Yeah. Teams are bullies, man. Like, like the Panthers are bullies. The Lightning, the Bruins, like whoever, the entire Atlantic Division, and there's some big teams in the West too. Like teams are bullies, like there's a reason that Carolina has been so good for so long, but they can't get over the hump because they're worn down by the 3rd round every single year, so, and I truly, like, I used to think it was such a boomer take, but I think the league is just going in that direction. It's getting bigger again. It's getting tougher again. It's still as skilled, but I think, the best teams have really skilled players who are able to like turn it up a notch because they're bigger and they're angrier and they're tougher. So I think that's what gets it done. And I'm not saying that Hagens isn't any of those things, and he's listed at 5'11", 185. That's a modest build. That's a pretty regular build. That might even be around average in the NHL. And that's not saying that, undersized guys can't get it done. Look at a guy like Clayton Keller, who had a fantastic year last year. He's a bit undersized.
If you have a motor, like you mentioned Cooley, that guy's got a motor. Hughes has a motor. Yes, they are undersized. If you have a motor and can skate away from all of that we're talking about, then you can be successful. But I know what you're saying.
Yeah. And like Hughes, for example, fantastic player. He's been hurt a lot. Not saying it's because he's undersized, but it's one of those things. Like, I think teams are realizing that other teams are just full of bullies now, butchers even, like Bennett had that stupid quote the other day. I said I wasn't watching the celebration, but every time it's on my feed, I'm like hate watching and trying to skip. But anyway, he had that quote the other day where he was like, we're not apologizing for anything. People say we're dirty, but we're not apologizing. Like, that's the way of the NHL now, and you get away with it in the playoffs. So, yeah. That's a lot to say about James Hagens. I'm sure he's a great player. I'm sure he's got a motor. I like the guy. I thought he was going to go 1 overall a while ago, but I just couldn't see it working for Chicago.
No, fair enough. All right, fellas. Well, unless there's anything else to add here, I think that pretty much wraps it up. And again, we are debating, thinking about, something we'll have to have a conversation about is maybe doing one more final episode, a free agency preview, specifically. So that is something that we'll discuss. And when we decide, we will let you know on our Instagram. So anyway, guys, anything else to add here?
Yeah, I'll just say otherwise, if we're not back next week, then we'll be back for preseason previews about a month and a half before the next NHL season gets up and running. So lots of good content coming there if we're not back next week. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. All right. Everyone, thank you for your continued support, and thank you for listening to episode 245 of the podcast, and we will talk to you again soon.